Hi there, I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com, and this is my Smart American Accent training. Welcome to our live Friday class, where I take your questions about American English pronunciation, intonation, American accent, and more. I'd like to help you with everything you need to improve your personal and professional communication in American English. We've been talking a lot about difficult words lately, things that you struggle to pronounce, and please feel free to ask me your questions at any time in the chat. You can type in your question, and I'll pause periodically and read those out and answer the questions. So people will often ask me about words that they find difficult or things that they've been working on to improve and strategies to help them. I do like to share free resources and information, including videos that are on my YouTube channel and lessons I have on my website, speechmodification.com. So I'll be sharing those with you today as well. And today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the topic of silent letters. And this is something, again, that fits into the topic we've been discussing lately, which is how things being spelled differ from how things are pronounced. So we've been doing a lot of focus on vowel sounds and spelling, and looking at vowel letters and vowel sounds. And there are some silent vowel letters. There are also a lot of consonant sounds or consonant letters that can be silent. And usually where I think it causes confusion for people is, a number of places. Sometimes we're going to try to pronounce a letter in a word that's silent, and that'll cause a mispronunciation. And other times we have multiple words that have the same sounds, but different spelling. And sometimes we think because they're spelled differently, we should be pronouncing them differently. So let's look at some of the examples of that first. And again, if you have questions about this topic, feel free to ask, or if your question is about another topic, that is fine for today as well. Example of some hidden sounds or hidden letters, not hidden letters, misspelled silent letters. There, I got it. We've been talking about hidden sounds lately, and that's where there's a sound that there is no letter for. And now we're talking about the opposite, a letter that there is no sound for. So one example, if I think about the words right and right, most of you are probably pronouncing both of these words correctly. And even though they're spelled quite differently, you know how to say them and how to pronounce them. You may have some difficulty with the R sound, and if so, you can look at my American R videos to help you with that. But this is just a good example of how many different silent letters we can see. There is a third word, right, that also has the same pronunciation. So one of the things you'll find when you're looking at my lessons and videos is that I often use the IPA, that's the International Phonetic Alphabet, where there is one symbol for one sound. We talk about this a lot when we're looking at vowel sounds because, of course, vowels can be it's actually a diphthong, two vowel sounds that glide together quickly. I, or lax I. And so sounds besides the sound I, in these sounds are all the same. So I have my initial sound is an R sound. The symbol for that is an R, very convenient. I, and then the last sound in this word is T, the T sound. This one counts as one sound, it's one vowel, but even though it has two symbols, it's a diphthong, they glide together. And so you can see in these words, this sound is spelled as letter R. It's spelled as WR. And so here's one of my silent letters. There's no sound, there's no W or W sound in this word. And then at the end, I have another vowel letter in two of these, but this letter E is silent. And that is definitely one of the most common silent letters is silent E. We even call it silent E when we're teaching kids about spelling. One thing to know about silent E is that there is a fairly consistent spelling rule when you see an E at the end of the word and a vowel earlier in the word, that letter E changes how we pronounce this vowel. So for example, if I had the word writ, without the E, that is an actual word, writ, then I have vowel I. When I add the E, then my vowel sound becomes the I. And so we teach kids that the silent E makes the letter say its name, in which case it makes the letter I say the I sound. It makes the letter O say the O sound, so code versus cod. It changes that vowel. It works for all of the letters. So for example, name, when the E is at the end, then the A says A. Okay, so silent E is a useful one to know for spelling. And again, many of you know this rule and are applying it and using it correctly, but that's why that E is there. And then we have also in the word write, we have the GH sound, and it doesn't make any sound in this word. So I could really leave that out because there's no sounds for it. So those are just a few examples of letters that are not pronounced, that have no sounds. And there are some typical words that we have that people will mispronounce because of this. I've made a few videos for that. Recently, I made one for the word salmon, so we can talk about that word today. And we have other longer words that have sounds that are not pronounced. And yes, so you can ask questions about this topic or other topics as well. And I want to look at some other letters that we see that are silent. So first, let's look at salmon. So we have the letter L oftentimes not making any sounds. And again, it may be influencing how I pronounce the vowel sound. But in the word salmon, we just have the vowel A and salmon, the sound, which actually is the upside down E, schwa in this word, salmon. First syllable stress, long and short. So I will hear sometimes people trying to say that L, saying it more like salmon. And I do think that there are some dialects of English where pronouncing the L is the correct way to pronounce it. So I'm always going to be talking about American English pronunciation and what we typically do in North American English. And in North American English, salmon has no L sound. So that's another silent letter. Sometimes we have a letter at the end of the word. For example, the words comb and dumb just have the M sound at the end. So the B is silent. There's no B there in both of those. And again, it can make me think I'm supposed to do something for that sound when I'm not. Another not exactly silent letter would be the letters NG. And we talk about these letters often because many people have accent error patterns on the NG sound. So there's two letters for one sound. So the NG says which is a sound where I'm lifting the back of my tongue. It's not an N plus a G sound. That would sound like strong, strong. So when you say the word strong, you should feel the back of your tongue lifting for one sound. So in some ways to think about it, you can think it's a silent G, but we also don't really do an N in that word either. So we use two letters to represent one sound. You can find out more about that in my videos for NG. And I'll show you one way you can search for any of these patterns that we talk about in this class. You can use the search tools on YouTube. You can also go to speechmodification.com. And if you go to the free practice and to the online practice free trial, that's where all of my free lessons and videos are. And so I could search for, I'll just put in NG, and all of the lessons related to that topic will come up. So you can see there's quite a few. This is a pretty prolific topic. And if I look at American accent error patterns, I can just check that out, and it'll talk about what errors you might be making on that sound, how to correct it. It gives you some visuals and some videos, and usually some links to some further information to follow up. So I hope you'll use those resources and find them helpful. We have a question about a rule for using I in elision, schwa as in summit. So he's asking about the word summit, and he's wondering about the I vowel. So he's showing us summit has the schwa in the first syllable and the reduced I in the second syllable. Elision, schwa. I'm not exactly sure what your question is, so maybe you can clarify that for me a little bit and tell me what you're looking for. I think you're wondering about the rules for what vowels to use. In this case, the reduced syllable will often have an I or a schwa, and sometimes it has to do with the spelling of the word. The most important thing is that I'm long and stretched out on the first syllable and short and reduced on the second. So summit, summit. If I say summit, summit, it doesn't really sound that different. The most important thing is that I'm short and I'm using a lax reduced vowel there. You can use the dictionary to help you know which one, but I usually try to emphasize getting the syllable stress correct, and using the correct vowel in the stressed syllable tends to be more important than the exact vowel you're using in the unstressed syllable. So I'm not sure I answered your question quite correctly. Let me know if I didn't, and I'll try again. Catherine wants to know if I have any tips for non-native speakers not to sound like a robot. Okay, so I think what you're referring to there, Catherine, is intonation, and how when we're speaking a language that's not our native language, we can be somewhat uncomfortable in using the intonation patterns in that new language. So maybe one strategy is that we stay relatively flat in pitch. We don't really go up and down much. And that is what would make you sound more like a robot. So I usually suggest taking a look at your native language and listening to how intonation works in your native language. So do you go up and down, or is your native language a little more flat in pitch? Once you can identify what you do naturally, you will tend to do what you do in your native language in American English as well. And so you have to be able to begin to let go of, it's okay that American English has a different pattern. I can use a little bit more pitch. I can be a little bit more flexible. And then I would say going through my intonation playlist. So if you go to Speech Modification Seattle on YouTube, you'll find that I have a number of playlists there. And so you'll want to check out on the playlists this one here that says American Intonation. And that's just going to walk you through some basic steps of building and understanding intonation patterns. Beyond that and the lessons on my website, I would say the more you can do to get comfortable with imitating, the better, because the way we learn intonation is by hearing and imitating. It's the first thing we learn when we're tiny babies, before we can say words, before we have vocabulary, grammar, any of it. We can hear the na-na-na, na-na, the ups and downs of our parents' voices, and it has meaning for us. And that's what we start to make. We start to make noises with intonation. We play around with it as babies. And babies and little kids are very expressive. They have no self-consciousness about using intonation. And so you have to come to the new language with a little bit of that spirit of playfulness. And also, I would say, starting with some really basic pitch patterns. And you may find it hard to imitate, but you're probably actually already using a lot of these patterns. So if you struggle with pitch and imitating, what I suggest is starting with just some really simple rising and falling pitches. For example, you can use this with any words. Try asking the question and giving the answer 2 words. So we're going to rise up. Should I? I should. So we're just kind of noticing one goes up, one goes down. Should I? I should. Can I? I can. Do I want to? No, I don't. I'm being you there, where I'm talking about maybe the reluctance to imitate. Not you specifically, but all of us in general feel more comfortable with our native language intonation. I've often had people tell me they feel like they're being a little fake if they use American intonation patterns. But I always try to reassure them that it actually should feel that way a little bit at first. It's a foreign language. It should sound foreign to your own ears. Your voice should feel a little bit like it's not yours. You can begin to hear that voice in your head. And I'll reassure you that when you're using an American intonation pattern, it doesn't sound fake to the Americans listening to you. It just sounds natural. Just sounds like you're following the rules and doing what we do. So it's a pretty long-winded answer. Using what's around you, using media, imitating, and kind of building the skills up slowly tends to be really helpful. Okay, great. Sound in the word ran. Hers is retroflex. What is more common in native speakers, retroflex or bunched? So she is talking about the American R, and what we have for American R is that American speakers will use either one. So whatever was easiest for them when they were a kid to make that sound is what their tongue does. So retroflex is curled back. My tongue is like a bowl. I personally use the bunched R, for pretty much all of my R's. The retroflex R is harder for me. And in my experience with American kids and finding from Americans, I'd say it's a mix. I think the bunched R is a little easier and more people use that, but it probably depends on what's easier for your tongue. I tend to try to teach both and see what comes more easily. And so if you're naturally using a retroflex R for ran, then that's what you should use. I also read research recently that says there are some things that are in between. People use a mix. It's all about the context and how our tongue most smoothly creates that tight sound. So yes, that was a good question. Thank you. Darlene would like to know how to say grasped correctly. Oh yeah, that's a tough one, Darlene. So let's look at that. So what's tough about that is how many consonants we have in a row in this word. First of all, we have the gr at the beginning. So the GR is going to be challenging for people who are working on their R sound. And then we have here, this is another sort of silent letter, another silent E. I'm glad you pointed this out because I wanted to talk about it. So I don't really make any sound for that E. If I were to write this out in IPA, I would have the gr consonants, the A vowel, the S, P, and a T sound. So because the P in grasp is voiceless, my voice isn't on, P, P. When I add the ED to that, it just becomes a T sound, grasped. So that's the same as, for example, the words talked or walked. They really have just a T sound at the end rather than anything like a D or an ED. Talked, grasped. So you may find it challenging to do the sp and t all together in a row. And what I would suggest for that is just building it. So first just try grass. That's the first part, grass. When you can say that, try grasp, grasp. If that's challenging, you can just try the asp with an S, an A, an ass, and P. And finally, when you can say grasp, try adding your T, grasped, grasped. You can also try some words with just P and T, like apt or capped, and then try to, insert in that third consonant in a row. So definitely when there's multiple consonants at the end, it can be challenging to sequence those in words. You just want to build it slowly until your mouth cooperates with making all of those sounds. Javier wants to know how to pronounce the Z in words with the letters DS. For example, bridesmaid, sounds, birds. It's difficult to distinguish Z. I hear the sound like S. Yes, so if I'm saying a word like birds or hands or needs, The sounds there are the D and the Z sound. And what American speakers will do is they lengthen the vowel before the D. That helps us perceive the D sound. So rather than neat or neats, I'm holding my vowel longer. That's one really important point that is going to help you get the voicing on the D and help me hear it as a D when you're saying it. So trying it with a T and then a D can be helpful. Neat, neats, needs. And then secondly, once I lengthen that vowel, I want to keep my voice on when I'm saying the D and the Z sound. And to do this, I would suggest it's much easier to do it when I'm going into another word, because then I'm linking and then my Z sound tends to go more on this word. So it's much easier to say needs are. Let's make sure our needs are met, needs are, than it is to say just needs. When I say needs, I am saying a Z, but my voice trails off and my Z eventually gets a little bit devoiced and becomes an S. That's natural. For any word that ends with a Z, like was or is, I'm not saying was, is. I'm saying was, is. There's a Z that kind of finishes as an S. So I don't want it to finish as an S if I'm moving to another word. I don't want needs are. I don't want to hear that noisy voiceless part. And so I link and I put the Z on the next word. Practicing needs are, hands are, birds are, will really help you keep that Z sound and move it into more contexts. It's natural and fluent to link, and we can use it to help us when we are struggling with pronunciation. Thank you. That's a very good point, and many people have that same issue that you do. Great. Okay. We're all, struggling right now with all the changes happening in the world, and I hope that people are still finding ways to connect and to celebrate and to feel good about. It's okay to be, to find joy and to find happiness where you can in these difficult times. And I certainly find a lot of happiness and joy from having everyone attending my classes, giving me good comments and feedback and asking questions. Being able to reach out to people around the world and help people is really valuable to me. And I thank you for everything that you contribute to these classes. You really bring a lot to the channel, to my website, and to my teaching by asking questions. It helps me know what people need to know, what topics to cover, and what new videos to make. So thank you all for that. And please continue to leave your comments and questions. And if you're watching the video and it's not live, you can still leave comments and questions in the comments. I do go back and check those. I answer the questions. I send you to resources to help you. Oftentimes I already have videos and resources that will answer your questions. And if I don't, I will bring it up in the next week's class or create a new video just for you. So thank you, everyone. We have another question, which is how does the word beautiful sound? And Javier wants to know if it's beautiful or beautiful. Yes, so we do have the D sound. And I think maybe you're asking about that T in beautiful, about whether we really do that as a D or as a flap, which I think we use the upside down R for that. And Americans will use the flap. So I often teach words with the flap T in the middle as using a light D, beautiful, beautiful. That tends to be easier for people than thinking of it as the flap if they have a flap in their language that is usually used with the R. So for example, some people will pronounce the word very with this letter being a flap, very, very. So it's a light tapping up, and in English we use that d sound as a D or as a flap T. Beautiful, beautiful. So I have a lot of videos teaching you how to make this flap T, and sometimes I will point out to you how some languages use the flap for an R. American English doesn't use it for the R. We use it for the T in the middle of words. So beautiful has a flap T. if you say it with a D and you say light enough and fast enough, no one will be able to hear the difference between your D sound and your flap T sound. Point about the ED was the last one I wanted to talk about today for silent letters. And I was thinking more in terms of when we add ED for past tense, some people have a tendency to think that we have to say id or ed for that it gets its own syllable. And in words like wanted or needed, it does, because I can't just add a T or a D to a word that ends with a T or D. So I do have wanted and needed, but I don't have moved. I just have moved. So that, if I write it out in IPA, has no vowel sound between my V and my D, just moved. And that can be hard for people to say those sounds in sequence. Going from V to D can be challenging. And also, you may wonder why we spell it this way. And that's probably sometime in the history of English, we did say moved. I was very moved. And now that has dropped out, and now we just say moved. So watching out for what happens with ED and past tense, you can take a look at my past tense videos and lessons. That will help you. And you can also learn some of the rules for the ED. Most of the time when I have ED at the end of the word, it just says the D sound with no E sound. And sometimes, like in Darlene's word grasped, or in the words walked and talked, the ED actually says the T sound. Okay, so all right, so thank you so much for all the questions and comments. I'm going to wrap up for today. I like to keep these lessons to be about 30 minutes so that it's a manageable amount of time for you to view the lesson, take in the information. If you have questions and comments that I didn't get to today, you can put those in the comments and we'll talk about them next week. Next week, I think we'll be talking about difficult words, and I'm also going to share some tips with you about video conferencing and how working from home might be affecting your communication. If you'd like to get a sneak preview of that, you can go to my website, modification.com, and just like I pointed out before, in the free practice online practice free trial, we have a little lesson about the do's and don'ts of using Zoom and Skype and other video conferencing, what to watch out for, what to be careful of, and how to take advantage of those tools. There's quite a few things that you can do that will help you with accent, with speech and communication, where you have this new opportunity if you're working from home and participating in these types of video calls that can help you notice and monitor your own speech and make some improvements. So you might as well try to take advantage of what's going on now and using those tools to help you. Okay, so we have an urgent request from someone for another shout out, and I appreciate you being part of the class. I'm going to have to wrap up for now, so check it out again next week if you like, and we'll say hi to more of your friends and birthday people. Okay, so thanks for being part of class. I'm Christine Dunbar from Speech Modification. Remember, if you want to sound American, you can do it. speechmodification.com.